WNST, Tallahassee when the Orioles are stinking the joint up down at Camden Yards. And about 5.5 weeks from now, we will get them back out onto the field. The Baltimore Ravens in 2017. Probably feeling a little better now than we were a couple of weeks ago. This guy not only played for the Ravens and has a Super Bowl ring, but has been a longtime opiner of all things Ravens and has his unique insights here now. We welcome Brad Jackson, longtime linebacker and longtime Ravens pundit backer. What's going on with you summertime? You're doing the daddy shuttle right now. You're not in football mode right now, right?
No. My football mode won't start for me, Nestor, until mid-August, sometime August 14th or 15th. And right now, just traveling around the country with my 16-year-old daughter's travel softball and the big softball circuit, recruiting circuit, showcases, and all that good stuff. And so right now, I'm just a softball dad with a big floppy hat on, a backpack, and helping to get a bunch of our girls recruited so they can continue their dreams of playing softball in college.
Well, I tell you what, I mean, I know a lot of people our age now, Brad, and I'll throw you into that mix with a similar thing. I mean, having kids that play, I guess it really adds something to you, right? I mean, having been an athlete and had parents that ran you around so you could be a professional athlete, right?
Yeah, well, these kids have way better than I do. So, for all the parents out there doing travel softball, travel lacrosse, travel, soccer, basketball, I feel your pain, and we're all in there to try to do more for our kids. So I know I definitely travel more now with my daughter than that was ever done for me. But that's this day and age of youth sports, and it's expensive. So I know a lot of families can't do it, and but it just takes some time. We'll be home. I think we left 9 days ago, and we'll be home a day here and there to change luggage and see the dogs and do that, but we'll probably only get nine days home in Maryland between a week and a half ago when we left until August 14th, 15th. So it's great. You got to do it for your kids, and I tell you, Nestor, it's one of those things that I'd rather miss a tackle or drop an interception to win the Super Bowl than to see your daughter not have success. And I'm sure I speak for all the parents out there listening that when a kid is, playing goalie, they don't want any goals to go by. You want your kid to make every shot in basketball or to shoot the ball well in lacrosse. But, it's painful as a parent than it was as a player. I could accept not doing something right at the time. But, when you see your kids, if they make an error or pop up or hit a ground ball versus, in a big moment, it's painful. So I'm stressed out, but like all parents are, but, wouldn't do it any other way and enjoy my summers, traveling with my daughter, seeing the country, playing good ball, her being around her teammates and having fun.
Well, Brad, I sit here and take all the angst of Ravens fans here. I've been doing that from the very beginning, as you know, and boy, there was a lot of angst around here in the offseason and the spring and then after the draft, and they didn't draft Flacco any help on offense. And I know you're a defensive guy first and foremost, but how do you feel about the team right now? And certainly different with no Pitt and no Tavon Young than maybe with a Boykin and then they bring in Jeremy Maclin. It really has been an offseason. They haven't played at all, but I think our opinion of them changes with every acquisition or before or after the draft, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's more exciting for the fans right now that's why the fans get so hyped up over the draft. They think that one player, will ultimately change, the path that their franchise is on or take their franchise to another level. And when you lose, obviously, a guy like Dennis Pitta, that obviously hurts considering, what a great year he had last year in his comeback. And, unfortunately, that's the game. But, you're going to gain a guy like Ben Watson who missed last year and the Ravens were counting on in a big way. So hopefully he can come back and kind of, pick up where Dennis left off and be a key asset for Joe Flacco. And then, like you said, there still was nothing done on the edges with wide receiver. And then they were fortunate enough to get Jeremy Maclin and sign him to a 2-year deal. And the Ravens, we haven't done a great job or even a good job of developing our own wide receivers that we draft. It's been high draft picks on. They've had far more success. If you go back to my former teammate, Qadr Ishmael, an older free agent that came in and led the team, on the in the wide receiver department. Then you have Derek Mason, and then, obviously you have Steve Smith Sr. So, they're kind of hoping that this veteran wide receiver, and I know Jeremy's not as old as those guys were when they came, so hopefully, this could be something that would be a good relationship because he still has, in my opinion, I think some good years left if he can stay healthy and be someone that Joe Flacco, a veteran wide receiver, understands the game, understands how to prepare, understands route running, and he could potentially be that guy, that number one guy that is not near the end of his career like all those guys were, that maybe they can build something. I know it's only a 2-year deal, but maybe there's another 3-4 years, or 2 extra years on top of those 2 that this turns into something that 3-4 years, until it gets to getting around that time when it's time for Joe to hang him up year 14 or 15, that they could develop into a relationship and we'll see. There's still hope that Rashard Perriman, we're all hoping that this is his transformation year, that he kind of steps up into that role, to be the number one pick that, everyone is still waiting on him to be. And then, you have Chris Moore, who's a speedster, my guy, my favorite Raven, because he's the Cincinnati Bearcat.
Of course.
He's a speed burner. He's a guy that can stretch the defense. And so you look at it, it looks exciting on paper, but at the end of the day, we've kind of been here, and you've been around the team since 1996. There were years that it looked great on paper, and then things didn't turn out so well. The team has missed the playoffs 3 years in a row, and you look at it, and there was a lot of promise in each of those years. So, one, you have to have the football gods on your side and be able to stay healthy. And then 2, you got to have your stars play like stars. And this is no knock on Joe. There's a lot of things that go involved with it. The offensive line needs to play better to protect him. The coach has got to call some running plays to protect him, to give him an opportunity to be successful, because we've seen the formula of when Joe Flacco is a great quarterback, and that's when they have a great running game. That's when he can do play action and use that big cannon he's got on his shoulder to make some of the amazing throws that we've seen over the last 9 years.
Here's BJack50 out on Twitter, and our longtime friend and one-time Raven, Brad Jackson, although he's got a Purple Heart here for all things not Bearcats at this point. And, you mentioned this offseason and the last few offseasons. Ozzie, Eric, the whole scouting staff's taking a lot of heat about the Matt Elam, and now he got himself into the pokey again here this offseason, embarrassing that pick even more, and Arthur Brown and Perryman we're still waiting on, and all these guys. One thing for sure about this organization, Brad, and I talked to all these national media pundits and people in the game and used to be in the game and all of that. Ozzie garners so much respect for 22 years of doing it for here. But this offseason, everybody says, well, Ozzie will figure it out. They'll get it right. They'll figure it out. And there's something about recruiting to the Ravens, whether it's a Weddle, whether it's a Jefferson, whether it's a Woodhead, in this case, Macklin, who had other opportunities and Buffalo wanted him. But there is something about the Ravens don't lose when they go out to get a player and they have an open checkbook and they've identified a player they want. Most of the time, the player doesn't come here and say, nah, I'd rather go play for the Steelers, or nah, I'd rather go play for the Broncos. For whatever reason, and maybe this is the old recruiter in John Harbaugh that you remember when you were both younger men out there in Cincinnati, that there is something about the building and the organization that can recruit a player in the open market.
Well, absolutely. The new $40 million expansion they're already doing on the beautiful facilities that, we affectionately call the Castle. When a player like Jeremy Macklin, and I know LaShawn Shady McCoy, who they were teammates, they were kind of brought up together in Philadelphia where they both were originally drafted to. Guess what? You go to Buffalo, New York, they have an okay facility. It's nice. But all of a sudden you walk in the building. They just expanded the cafeteria to make it almost 2.5 times size bigger than what it was. Everything that Mr. Bisciotti and Mr. Dick Cass, the president, do is to make sure that when a player walks in the building, and you've been there 1,000 times, if not more, Nestor, that it's almost home, that a player doesn't want to leave, and that everything is there for these athletes to help them, strive and be the best that they can be at their job. Now, it's up to them to not be spoiled and take advantage of it, but those things matter. And then when you're talking about a wide receiver like Jeremy Macklin, which is one of the first times in Ravens history, that's why I said you have a younger wide receiver, when we've had other wide receivers his age or even younger turn down coming to the Ravens because, now Macklin understands I got a beautiful facility. They obviously care about their players, and all of a sudden you add a quarterback in there that has a big arm, that has the potential, for him to, to be successful. And then you had Marty Morningwig. They had a relationship back when he was in Philly. So there's a lot of things, and obviously Coach Harbaugh's ties to Philly, have something to do with that. It's one of those things that it's been helpful, and you're hopeful that it, turns into something that blossoms and is fruitful for not only for the team, but for the fans and their success.
He is BJack50 out on Twitter. Brad Jackson joining us here on WNST. All right, so much of this is this player, that player, but you mentioned Flacco, and Joe would be the first one to tell you he was disappointed with how he played last year. Some thoughts about where you are with Flacco, because you mentioned that cannon on the shoulder. This is a pretty tender point in his contract and his career for Harbaugh, for everybody involved here, that in order for the team to be better this year, we need a better version of Joe this year, too.
Well, that's without question. This team will go as 5 goes. That's why they, he'll be the highest paid guy in the NFL this year. He was top 3 last year, top 4, whatever it was, and you can't, at the end of the day, you can't garner such a big piece of the salary cap pie. And again, not taking anything away to what he's earned. I'm a former player. Get all the money you can. If they're gonna give it to you, God bless you. But at the end of the day, you have to perform. We all know last year, Joe Flacco, his completions percentage, increased, but there was too many checkdowns. It was basically a drop back. I, as a former player, I've never had that injury, but I played with guys that have the injury. I think he was, it took a while for the rush to get knocked off. And then early on, he was getting pressure. There was a lot of coordinators, when you go back and you watch the film, they were hunting Joe, especially the first 4 to 6 weeks of the season. And unfortunately, like any quarterback, it doesn't matter if it's Johnny Unitas, Joe Montana, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Joe Flacco, when you get in their face and you get them off rhythm and you knock them off the spot, as we're told defensively, that's going to have an effect on how they stand in that pocket. Well, we all know what type of injury Joe Flacco had. And unfortunately, it's one of those situations that he had to gain his confidence. It may not be said publicly. It may not be one of the things that a lot of fans, when they look at it, see. But when you got grown men hunting you and you're the guy with the ball in your hand and guys really want to, not intentionally hurt you, but they know if they can take number 5 out of the game or rough him up a little bit, that may make him have a couple throws that fail. That may make him throw a couple interceptions, and errantly, because he's getting rid of the ball that half second earlier than what he's supposed to versus standing in. So to me, it's a combination of things. Yes, Joe has to play better. Yes, he can't just drop back and look for the check down to get rid of it. You have to take some shots deep, and I know the coverage dictated it sometimes. That wasn't available to him, but we've all seen it. Hey, you know what? If they got cover 2 or cover 3, cover 4, we're going to drop back, and we at least got to loosen up that defense. You got the speed with Perriman and Chris Moore, and those guys that can and Mike Wallace, that can obviously take anybody deep. Not too many defensive coordinators, being a defensive guy, are going to leave those 3 one-on-one. I mean, that's not good business unless that coordinator wants to do what I'm doing, which is retired, sitting on the side watching and talking about it. So he has the weapons. Macklin's going to add to that, but he has to play better. He has to be able to not turn the football over. He can't have career lows in certain categories being a 10-year vet coming into this league. And so the guys will look to him. If you look around the locker room, I know there's this leadership thing that, the Ravens have kind of said that's not the case. We have leaders. But honestly, when you look at it, and you've been around our great teams, and when there was that leadership, there isn't that person per se. And I'm not saying that that's Joe, because I'm not in the locker room, but there isn't that person that you see that can kind of galvanize people and bring them together.
Well, Steve Smith leaving has left a lot of oxygen in the room, right? Literally.
A lot of oxygen. So that's, and Joe's not that guy, but guess what? You're the highest paid on the team, the highest paid in the league, and you're the franchise quarterback. They're going to need your voice. They're going to need you to step up and, kick over a gate or anything at halftime. But the Ravens have to do their part, and my big concerns, Nestor, is I still see a hole at center. I still see a hole at right tackle. So they got to find a way to make that offensive line better. And right now, that's my biggest concern going into the season, because if you can't run the football, if you can't control the trenches, protect your quarterback, open up running lanes, we're going to have more of the same where we're sitting up here talking about on Monday morning, Joe Flacco had to throw 47 times. And we know that, unfortunately for him, he has more losses, double the losses when he has over 40 pass attempts than he has victories. That's just not who the Ravens are. That's not the DNA of the Ravens. And if they don't get back to running the football, then, as you said, there's a lot of people tied into Joe Flacco's success, and that being Coach Harbaugh. And we've heard Mr. Bisciotti say this already publicly, that if they don't make the playoffs next year, there could be and there will be changes. We don't know what that means, but we've all been around the game enough to know Mr. Bisciotti is not a guy that is doing everything for the players, for the fans, for the organization, for the city and Ravens flock to not allow the team to go to the playoffs, to not allow them to go to the playoffs 4 years in a row.
He is Brad Jackson and BJack50 out on Twitter as well. Last thing for you, all the drafting of the defensive guys, you're a defensive guy. You know, are you convinced the defense, I don't want to say elite or use that stupid word, but is this a top 5 defense potentially in your mind? Can the defense be the reason the team wins this year to some degree?
Well, they're going to have to be. It's a team effort. And I wouldn't say they're top 5 because there's a lot of young guys that haven't proven anything. Yes, as we talk about, there's a lot of weapons. But at the end of the day, you have to go out and produce. You have to go out and be the best. We've seen teams built before in the past around the National Football League, and guess what? They haven't played as well as everybody would like them to. Look down the road at the Washington Redskins. For years, they had defenses where they spent a ton of money on big-name guys, and they didn't perform. We got younger guys. We got hungry guys. I think that's an advantage because these guys are still trying to prove themselves and get the next contract. But at the end of the day, they got to learn to be unselfish, play as a unit. I think Coach Dean Pease, Don Martindale, Chris Hewitt, the guys on the defensive side will do a fabulous job. Now it's up to the players to execute the game plan. And we'll see. I'm hopeful as a defensive guy, but at the end of the day, we'll find out. There's 16 tests that will tell us whether they are a top 5 defense and can carry this team to the playoffs and hopefully a Super Bowl, or if not.
Feeling good about them? Better now than maybe you did in January?
No.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, they're running around in shorts and T-shirts. So until we get those pads on and until, they see the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns and Pittsburgh Steelers twice, and then you start going down the rest of that schedule, until I see it, those 16 tests, then I'll start to feel either good about it or not so good about it.
Now, the softball dad in you tells you they're at least going to be better than the Orioles have been, right?
Yeah, listen, I haven't covered much of the Orioles. I know I'm an Anaheim, California guy, so, of course, Mark Trumbo, he's from Anaheim. He's my dude. Adam Jones is a San Diego guy, and I love Manny Machado. He's on my fantasy team. So I know the Orioles fans were upset about Machado kind of struggling a little bit. I got an option. We'll trade a Gatorade, some prospects for Manny Machado to my Los Angeles Dodgers. We'll take him off your hands if Orioles fans don't want Manny anymore, if they don't think he's good anymore. We'd love to have him in L.A., but, yeah, it's, they are better right now than the Orioles, and hopefully the Orioles turn around because I'm still hopeful for a Dodgers and Orioles World Series, so I don't have to travel as much. And
all you have to do is travel back to 1966, and you can get that, Brad.
Yeah. Of course, when I wasn't born, so I don't count that loss.
And you wouldn't like it either if you went back to 66. That didn't work out well for the Dodgers.
No, yeah, I know the history of my team, so I don't want to replay that. But I would love it, if they're close and it'd be a close proximity to travel for the World Series. But I hope Orioles, and I think the world of Buck Showalter. I think he's a good manager. He's fiery. He almost reminds me of a guy that could be a football coach, and you don't see that very often in baseball, where he's intense and he's fiery, and it's the grind of the season. So we'll see what happens, and I just, especially my California dudes and Machado, I cheer for them, with the Orioles.
All right, man. Well, enjoy all your softball daddy pursuits out there and all the travels with your kids. And good luck to you guys this summer. And, hey, we'll be blowing the whistle about 5-6 weeks. We'll be out there watching the purple guys get it after it. All right, man?
Sounds good.
Thanks, you got it. Brad Jackson. He is BJack50, our longtime friend. You can find him out on Twitter. And, of course, anywhere the Ravens Super Bowl ring follows him from the 2001 team, one of our favorites, BJack50, as they say, out on Twitter. You can find me out in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day. day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you happen to be. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. That's all powered up by Planet Fitness and planetfitness.com, where it is $10 a month to get in bikini shape, and the summer is here. Last but never least, any breaking news on the Norfolk shuttle for the Orioles? Hopefully there's no breaking news for the Ravens. It all comes to you first on the WNST text service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colasos will be here on Thursday with the SSV on WNST, driving you home from 3 until 5 in the afternoon. I am here all week hoping that the Orioles get better. It was more fun about talking about them in April than it's been in June. That's for sure. Nasty at WNST.net finds me also. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live anywhere Facebook Live and YouTube take us in our archives. And don't forget the Peter Principles. Speaking of the archives, I've written the archives of the Oriole history under the stewardship of Peter G. Angelos out there now. Just Google WNST and Peter Principles, and you can also find it out on our homepage and anywhere my social is. Chapter 6 this week out at WNST.net. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.